Welcome to session 4. In this session, we're going to talk about your next step and really your first step in building wealth, which is really defining your baseline lifestyle, creating the life that you are anticipating and you're dreaming about and that you want to live. And as followers of Jesus, we've mentioned this before, I never want my lifestyle to increase. I never want to see lifestyle creep come into my life as my resources and as my wealth is beginning to build. I want my generosity to increase. And that's what I want to challenge you on here too, is I want your generosity to increase as you begin to build wealth. But if I don't define this baseline early, and I don't define from the beginning what kind of lifestyle that I want to have, then we will all experience lifestyle creep because we haven't put a plan in place to guard against it. Lifestyle creep is really not what we are after at all. And the best way to do this, in my experience, is by defining what I call expense buckets. Expense buckets. And for me, this is a little bit different than creating a budget. A budget is a list of your itemized expenses. So in other words, when you are living by a budget, you are taking the income or what you make from your job. Let's say it's $50,000 a year for the sake of this example, and then you are budgeting that out. So how far can $50,000 go? And can that $50,000 provide for my expenses? So what you want to do is you want to live below $50,000. You want to live basically below that line, below that income amount, so that you are not gathering and gaining more debt in your life. You want to live within your means. So that's kind of budget 101 kind of language. Living by creating, on the other hand, major expense buckets is a little bit different. It's listing out, first of all, what kind of lifestyle that you want to have, or these major expenses you desire to have, and then it's creating a process, okay? It's creating a process for developing and creating passive assets in your life that then provide for these major expenses. These major expenses, these aren't things that you're gonna put into your budget. Eating out of the restaurant is not a major expense. Your cup of coffee, your favorite local coffee shop, is not a major expense. Even generosity is not a major expense. That's 10% off the top and hopefully more and growing as your income grows through your passive assets that you create in your life. So your major expense buckets are the main expenses in your life. So what I want to do in this session is I want to show you how I've set up our major expense buckets. And so major expense buckets for me here are very simple. So major expense buckets are basically for us 5. We have 5 of them. So again, I mean, this is personal for us and how we've gone about setting up our life. And by no means am I an artist, so we're just going to pretend these are buckets. All right, so bucket 1, bucket 2, bucket 3, bucket 4, and then bucket 5. So these are our major expense buckets that I have in my life, okay? And this is what it looks like. So for us, this is housing. Right? So our housing expense, this is everything from mortgage to utilities, and then everything that comes within kind of the housing expense bucket. The second major expense that most of us have, right, is a transportation expense. So transportation, this could be your car payment, right? This could be if you live in a city, it could be something different, right? It could be just your taxi fare, Ubers, Lyfts, Metros expenses, and those types of things. So, but for us, this is 2 car payments, one for me, one for my wife. So we have housing, then we have transportation, and then our third expense bucket here. This is again a major expense for my family. Is private school. So our kids, they go to a Christian private school. They might not forever, but right now in this season, they do. And so this is a major expense bucket for our family. And then over here, we have daily living expenses. So I kind of have dumped them all into one different or one singular bucket here. So this is things like I mentioned earlier, going out to eat at a restaurant, cups of coffee, going to purchase different things and in normal day-to-day living that you do. This is what this is. And then finally for us, we've kind of taken this last bucket here, this expense bucket that we have for the Gibson family, and we call it Christmas and vacation. So for the sake of illustration, Xmas, vacay is this expense bucket, because we always spend more at Christmas than we should, and we always spend more on vacation than we should. We're always coming back, and we seem to be in the past always paying that off over time. So our major expense buckets in our life look like this: housing, transportation, private school, daily living expenses, and then Christmas and vacation. So remember, when you think about building wealth, what I want you to do is think about your major expenses that you have. Maybe in the near future, these expense buckets will change over time and in different seasons for us. But as I've defined this is also defining my baseline lifestyle, so that lifestyle creep doesn't come in as we earn and create more income and create more passive investment streams for our family. So here's the goal that we've set up. So at every stage of our basically our expense buckets here, the goal has always been have an asset that provides for each bucket. So I have one asset over here, right? That is what I've talked to you about in the introduction. It's the business that my brother and I started to buy investment properties. We didn't take any kind of pay from this business until year 5. But when we started taking pay, now this income is providing for both housing and transportation. I don't ever have to worry about it. Income comes in from this passive asset that we have, this business that owns different investment properties, and it goes into our accounts. Mortgage goes out, car payment goes out. I never have to think about it. I drove a Toyota Corolla and a Ford Escape forever. I mean, we never invested in cars. And it was kind of a conversation between my wife and I that we wouldn't buy, quote unquote, a nice car, still kind of Toyota, Honda, Chevy level, until we had an asset that was paying for it passively. So now we have an asset that's also providing for paying our mortgage and also providing for paying any kind of transportation, car payment that we might want to have. So we have 2 expense buckets taken care of by one passive asset. Then also, I've mentioned this as well, we have another asset that's providing for our kids to go to private school. So for instance, when we purchased our primary residence, we purchased it with the whole idea to put a guest house on the property. There was already a spot to do so. We had the kind of the vision behind it to make this happen. And when we built out the guest house, we rent out the guest house on Airbnb. Yes, it creeps into our privacy. Yes, we have people that we've never met before staying on our property, but we've decided that's what we want to do to be able to provide for the third expense bucket that we have, which is private school for our kids. Is a major expense. So we rent out our guest house every month. It comes straight into one account and goes directly out to pay for our kids' private school. Gibson Equity is another, Gibson Leadership is another asset that we have that's been set up like this to provide for daily living expenses. So if you're wondering, well, man, how does Greg Gibson even get paid? What does he do? Well, my goal is always to see churches planted and create resources that will further Great Commission work for Great Commission leaders like this course. Anything that we make from this, a lot of it's given away to church planting, a lot of it's given away to Great Commission work. Some of it provides for daily living expenses that we have. This also includes retirement. This also includes our Roth IRA contributions. This also includes different ways that we practice generosity. This expense bucket looks more like a budget for us so that lifestyle creep doesn't come in. We want to be able to give more, practice generosity. And then finally, I have another asset that we've created that every January and every July sends X amount of money that provides for Christmas, that provides for vacation. And so for us, we've been able to set up 4 assets, really 4 out of 10 assets that we have that provides for absolutely everything in our life. Everything in our life. The goal then, after you define your expense buckets, you're going to begin to work towards creating these assets that will provide for these expense buckets. And so this kind of thinking, I think, is important for 3 reasons. One, you never want to rely on your job to provide for your family. That is totally my opinion. You never want to rely on you exchanging your time for what that you might get from your employer. That is also your family's dependency upon exchanging your time for what you get from your employer. Number 2, you never want to rely on your job to create the life that you desire to live. So again, we're not trying to go big or go home or live large or even have lifestyle creep. That's why we've defined our major expenses. Anything else that comes in here goes out in terms of massive amounts of generosity. That's the hope that I have for you as well. And then 3, you never want to rely on your job to have or to leave an inheritance or a legacy for your children's children. In fact, what you want to do is you want to work a job with no strings attached. The goal is to be able to work a job, pastor a church, do missions, plant churches without having to depend on a 9-to-5 job. And when you have this kind of freedom in your life, several things begin to happen. One, you stop finding yourself being a yes man. You begin to understand that your livelihood is not dependent upon you being submissive to sometimes bad authority or even toxic authority in your life, because your bills and expenses are not dependent upon it. Your family stability is not dependent upon it. 2, you can have freedom to work the jobs or the kinds of jobs and take the kinds of assignments that you want to take. In other words, your yes means more. You can begin to have freedom to say yes to what you want to actually do. And then 3, you begin to give, as I mentioned a moment ago, anything that comes in that's not in our baseline here, that's coming from another asset that we might create over here, another asset We're not going to enlarge our expense buckets. That's not the goal. The goal is to give all away. Give it more and more and more to the work of the ministry. This is the kind of lives that I think we should desire to live. So when I think about tent making, when I think about creating passive assets that build wealth over time, this is step number one. We're going to anchor our why in the Bible. We're going to see Boaz live a life that we want to model after. We're going to understand that stewardship is turning what God's entrusted to us into more. $1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 into whatever it might be is the next step. But the first step before we even put our plan together is to understand and decide and define what kind of life we want to live by defining our expense buckets so that then we can start to build the assets that are going to provide for our family, build wealth over time, and allow us to leave an inheritance. Again, Proverbs 13, verse 22, to our children's children.